wonderful subscribers. So I already did a video on the second letter that I sent to DMV on right to travel and to specifically with their own form unregister my automobile. Because I am not a commercial driver and I am not required to have a license plate on my car, registration. Hello, wonderful subscribers. So I already did a video on the second letter that I sent to DMV on right to travel and to specifically with their own form unregister my automobile because I am not a commercial driver and I am not required to have a license plate on my car, registration for my car, a driver's license for traveling in my car, or forced insurance. This is a fact that is in the law itself. It is in their own definitions, in the traffic code, in the transportation code, in all of their paperwork. The Supreme Court has ruled on it, 200 years of case law, and all states across the United States all have right to travel in their case law and court rulings. What they're doing is they get you into their little kangaroo courts and try to screw you over there. If you're successful in not allowing that to happen, and you can actually get to the Supreme Court, that's when you can make some real change. But they will do everything they can to keep you from ever taking right to travel anywhere farther than their stupid little courts, because they're just there to get money out of you. That's all they're doing. So the point here is to not end up in their little kangaroo courts, because first of all, what do you have to do with their corporation? That's a corporation. You're not contracted with them. They can't prove that you signed or rather with a meeting of the minds that you knew that you were becoming a subservient to their jurisdiction or even a part of their jurisdiction. So, and they know this. There's nothing they can do other than try to trick you into being a compliant little slave to their system of greed and corruption and terrorism and mass murder, and on the list goes. So I rambled again. I always ramble, I'm sorry. So this is, when I did that last video on my second letter to DMV, I, of course, went to read it over again and started making changes and some additions. So I didn't actually send it then, as I said I was. I did actually send it yesterday. You see the date up here on the top of the screen. First letter was sent January 2nd. I got their response back from that letter 6 weeks later. It took them a month and a half to respond to my, I think it was 8 or 9 page document on right to travel with that letter. And they responded with asking me to write in their little area highlighted on their form in the statement of facts, which I showed you in that last video. They wanted to know when I took my car out of California to Seattle, Washington. So I realized that I hadn't addressed the whole intent for that statement of fact, so I had to add something to this, and I came across some new information, which I'm going to share with you. There's some very good information in this letter, which, by the way, for you all, I have put here. That's something else. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll give a link to my letter, which I've taken out my name, my VIN numbers, anything personal relating to me. I've taken it out because this has got a lot of information on it, which I'm going to go over with you right now, the additions to my letter that I found. So how I number my document is just my own system. I put my VIN number here, which ends with a 4, and DMV-2. This is my second letter, so I do a 2. That's my numbering system on my correspondence with them to keep track of everything. And of course, I sent it certified mail, so they have to sign for it, and I will get a return receipt showing me that they did get my letter in case they never respond. So I'll try to find the additions to this letter without reading the entire thing again because it is 9 pages long. So I wrote here at the top, second request for confirmation that my private non-commercial automobile is unregistered, that the driver's license I was defrauded into applying for was voided, and with an additional request for information and or an application for acquiring exempt plates for my private conveyance as is required of you under 188 California 734-207, page 251, 1922. Cal Lexus 477. And this is new information that I found, which was quite eye-opening. I will thank you in advance for reading this letter in its entirety. So I wanted to put this at the top so they understood exactly what this letter is about and what I'm expecting, and what they're obligated to do, which is supply me with an exempt plate. Now let's get to that right now before I continue with the letter. This is, I keep doing that. This is very good information here. Now, this is on Scribd, and usually they only give you part of a document, and then you have to pay and subscribe to get the whole thing, which I won't do because you can find this information somewhere else. But for some reason, this entire thing is here, and it's not a full 5 pages. So this is the Marin Municipal Water District versus Charles Chenu. This is Supreme Court of California, May 16th, 1922. Apparently back then, a water truck would go around delivering water. It was non-profit. In other words, it was not a commercial vehicle. It was not making money on the roadways. Therefore, they ruled that, and I'll read some of this here, they ruled that he should be given exempt plates. Let's see here. Let me try to read some of this fast. The plaintiff applies to this court for a writ of mandate directing the defendant as chief of the Division of Motor Vehicles of the Department of Finance of the State of California to issue to the plaintiff certain license plates with the accompanying certificates, such license plates to be attached to certain automobiles owned by the plaintiff as acquired by the Motor Vehicle Act. This is in their own Motor Vehicle Act. The plaintiff is a municipal water district organized under the Act of May 11, 1911, and amendments thereto. All right, I want to make sure I was reading the right area. Excuse me, good grief, when I start talking. By the Act of April 6, 1915, the organization of said district was declared valid and it was described to be duly created as a public corporation. The plaintiff has construed and completed a large water collecting, storing, and distributing system and is operating the name in accordance with said act by collecting, selling, and distributing water to the inhabitants of the district and others. In carrying out its public duties and obligations under the act as required, it is necessary for it to use 13 motor vehicles, all of which are used exclusively by it in the discharge of its public duties. It applied to the defendant the necessary licenses, certificates, and license plates as required by the Motor Vehicle Act from persons operating and owning motor vehicles. So all of these are commercial terms, remember. Operating is commercial. Motor vehicle is a commercial vehicle. The defendant refused to issue the licenses, certificates, or plates except upon the payment of the license fees prescribed by the Motor Vehicle Act. Whereupon the plaintiff began this proceeding in mandamus. So, Section 3 of the Motor Vehicle Act provides that every owner of a motor vehicle which shall be operated or driven upon the public highways shall cause the same to be registered with the Motor Vehicle Department and shall deposit with his application for a certificate the proper registration fee as provided in Section 7 of this Act. It is conceded that the amount demanded by the defendant was the proper amount for the vehicles belonging to the plaintiff, etc., etc., etc. I don't want to bore you with all of this. So they're talking about where the money goes, and then we go up here. Okay, so the claim of the plaintiff, I'm reading right here, is that it is a public corporation, municipal in character, established and organized for the purpose of carrying on within the district the public service of furnishing water to the public, that it is a state agency for that purpose, and that under the well-established rule that words in a statute providing for the payment of fees or imposing burdens on property, which is what all of your registration fees and taxes and the fees you pay for your license and registration and license plates and forced insurance are burdens on your private property. So payment on fees or imposing burdens on property shall not be deemed to apply to public agencies or public property unless such intent is clearly expressed. The language of this act providing for the payment of license fees cannot be considered as having been intended to include or apply to water districts organized under the first act first referred to. I know this is really boring, somebody just reading to you.
No, it's not. That's that information.
Here, let me get to this. The defendant claims that the rule is inapplicable.
You read it to me, that means I don't have to read it for myself. This motherfucker reading some dope ass the driving laws in California. This motherfucker say, look, man, I'm not paying your insurance. I don't need your license. I'm not paying for your tags. You give me a tag that says I am exempt from all your bullshit because I am not operating a commercial vehicle.
In this case, because of the provisions of Section 2 of the Motor Vehicle Act. This section provides that all motor vehicles owned and used in the transaction of official business by the representatives of foreign powers or by officers, boards, or departments of the government of the United States, and all motor vehicles owned by and used in the operative work of such corporations as are taxed solely for state purposes under the provisions of the Constitution of this state, and such self-propelling vehicles as are used neither for the conveyance of persons for hire, pleasure, or business, nor for the transportation of freight, are hereby exempted from the payment of the fees in this act prescribed. Conveyance as are taxed solely for state purposes under the provision of motor vehicle action of official business by the representatives of foreign powers or by officers, boards, or departments of the government of the United States, and all motor vehicles owned by and used in the operative work of such corporations as are taxed solely for state purposes under the provisions of the Constitution of this state, and such self-propelling vehicles as are used neither for the conveyance of persons for hire, pleasure, or business, nor for the transportation of freight, are hereby exempted from the payment of the fees in this act prescribed. The department shall furnish free of charge distinguishing plates for motor vehicles thus exempt. Everybody, that's you and me, travelers on the roads. Right here, another Supreme Court ruling that states right here that if you are a person merely traveling, the department shall furnish free of charge distinguishing plates for motor vehicles thus exempt. That's you.
I gotta go get my traveler plates. Fuck this.
Okay, did you see it here? And such self-propelling vehicles are as used neither for the conveyance of persons for hire, pleasure, or business, nor for the transportation of freight, are hereby exempted.
I'm not transportating freight.
You do not have to pay for any of this stuff. This has already been ruled on multiple times throughout the years, decades, centuries. You have the right to travel. The claim is that by this specification of vehicles which are to be exempt, the statute evinces an intention to exclude all other vehicles and persons from the exemption. We think that Section 2, instead of justifying the position of the defendant, is positive evidence against the same. It excludes specifically all motor vehicles that are not used for the conveyance of persons for hire, for pleasure or for business. There is a companion rule of construction to that above mentioned, to the effect that exemptions in a statute imposing burdens are to be liberally construed in favor of the public. Everything should be construed in favor of the public, since this freaking terrorist organization government was put in place by us, for us. You own the government. We, the people, have the right to say, you're finished if you're not doing what we need you to be doing for all of us, or you can stay in place because you're doing a great job for us. They haven't been doing a great job for us for a very long time. As a matter of fact, they're lying to us constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 364 days a week, 365 days a year. Okay? They're terrorizing all of us. They are murdering us. They're pulling off false flag events which create wars that end up murdering millions of people. That's what our government has become. It is a corporation. I'll continue reading before another 20-minute rant goes off out of me. Even without the aid of this rule, however, we think a motor vehicle owned and used by a municipal water district organized under the law for the purpose of collecting and distributing water to the public and for the management of its works and system and discharging its public duties is not used in business, as that term is used in Section 2 aforesaid. The municipal water district is not a commercial corporation. It does not operate for profit. This is what they're standing on here. If this truck is not operating for profit, it is not commerce, then these burdens on their private property do not apply to them. It is not intended that it shall earn any money in excess of the necessary operating expenses of the plant devoted to the public use and for the acquisition of property necessary thereto. While the operations of such a public corporation are sometimes referred to as its business, it is nevertheless true that the context indicates that the word was used in a narrower meaning in this section. The general definition of the word is that which busies or engages time, attention, or labor as a principal serious concern or interest, but the word has a narrow meaning applicable to occupation or employment for livelihood or gain, and to mercantile or commercial enterprises or transactions. It is not to be presumed that the legislature undertook to place public corporations of this character in the same class as private corporations engaged in ordinary business. The rule of construction we have already referred to forbids it. So what they're just saying here is, even though this water truck is going around and selling water, it's not for profit. They're not profiting off of it. So you might say it's business, but they're only taking enough money to be able to use that money to continue operating. So basically, you're just paying for them to be able to bring you the water. It's not profit. So they are exempt under the Supreme Court. The passage evidently refers to ordinary business and not to the operations of the public corporations of the state. The phrase, for the conveyance of persons for hire, pleasure, or business, nor for the transportation of freight, exactly, clearly indicates an intention to describe ordinary occupations engaged in by private persons or private corporations, either for business or pleasure. And so far as it refers to business, it would include private business and not public business. If the word business was given the broader meaning contended for by the defendant, it would require the imposition of the license fees upon every municipality in the state and even the state itself, as a condition precedent to the issuance of license plates and certificates for the operation of all motor vehicles used by any of them in the public business of the state. So what they just said was, because, most government officials are all exempt from all of this stuff. They get their little private plates on their car and they don't ever have to pay a dime because apparently they're not for profit. So if they want to charge this water truck for registration, license plates, driver's license, all of the above, then they should be doing the same for every government official driving around with exempt plates, and FBI and CIA and all of the above, everything. And they aren't. They can't just make up their rules willy-nilly, which is what, of course, they do. For these reasons, we are of the opinion that the Motor Vehicle Department must issue these license plates and certificates to the petitioner for the motor vehicles in question without charging thereof. Let the writ issue as prayed for. So they are saying this water truckers must be issued these exempt plates without being charged registration fees, all of the above. That's what this ruling has concluded. And this is what I used in my letter. Right here. 188 Cal 734, etc., etc. They are obligated by law to issue me and all of us exempt plates. Period. That's it. So that's a bombshell right there that if you didn't know about, you need to include in your letters and your statements of facts. So this is all new in my letter. I added this. I comprehend that you asked me to use the statement of facts to inform you. This is my letter to the DMV, by the way. To inform you when my automobile was taken out of California. But that is a moot point, is it not? Considering that I have already provided you with countless Supreme Court rulings and 200 years of case law that confirm that the right to travel is an unregulable, untaxable, and constitutionally protected, unalienable right of every human not engaged in commerce when traveling in their automobiles. In addition to this is the fact that numerous departments of motor vehicles definitions all pertain to commerce, and at one point in the not-so-distant past, they all did. But you see, a part of the fraud and cover-up of the fraud for the purposes of extorting astronomical amounts of money out of Americans while treading on the natural rights is the alteration of definitions in the vehicle code of words like motor vehicle, removing from it all evidence of a motor vehicle being a commercial vehicle, and the removal of some definitions altogether, such as California has done with the word transportation, which is nowhere to be found here in the vehicle code itself. However, you define the term transporter in the Vehicle Code Division 1, 645. A transporter is a person engaged in the business of moving any owned or lawfully possessed vehicle by lawful methods over the highways, etc. In other words, commerce. Therefore, it obviously follows that transportation would be defined as a commercial activity of someone engaged in a for-hire capacity. Just look at California Vehicle Code. So I'm showing here the Vehicle Code definition of commercial vehicle is a motor vehicle. Motor vehicle it's right here, people, in the California Vehicle Code. Maintained for the transportation of blah, 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 primarily for the transportation, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So they're using the word transportation over and over and over again, but they don't define it. Because if they defined it, they're exposing themselves. So much of what they already still have, in their code does expose them, but they're picking away at it like a little scab. Many, and myself and many other travelers, find it very interesting that you use the word transportation within commercial definitions, but you do not define it. Perhaps you can let me know why that is. That all said, when I traveled in my automobile from the Commonwealth of California to the Commonwealth of Washington, I'm not going to call them states, people, I was not engaged in commerce and was in fact pursuing my life, liberty, and happiness. Conclusion. It is none of your business when I traveled from the Commonwealth of California to the Commonwealth of Washington. Can it be any clearer to you than this? U.S. Supreme Court Reno versus Condon. A lot of you already know this, but this begs repeating. This is in 2000, by the way, just 18 years ago, not 200 years ago. The activity licensed by state DMVs, that would be the DOL in Washington here, and in connection with which individuals must submit personal information to the DMV, the operation of motor vehicles, is itself integrally related to interstate commerce. It's right here. And these pieces of shit know it. So then I go on with my letter. A lot of this I've already read to you. Like I said, the document is on Google Docs, so you can read it yourself if I'm skimming over things you want to look at. So this letter I'm writing, this letter is my second attempt to provide the DMV with an opportunity to close your books on me by unregistering my non-commercial automobile and voiding the non-commercial driver's license, which I've been defrauded into believing I was required to apply and actually pay for all of my adult life. And then I repeat.
So what is your kind? That phrase always gets me. Your kind. Must have grown up with all women. I don't even understand what the fuck you're trying to say, bro. It's normal for your kind. You must have grew up around all men. Because that's normal for your kind.
This part here. I would like to add to my request that I'm seeking information on how to go about paying for and acquiring exempt plates. And then I throw in this Supreme Court ruling that I just showed you on Scribed. So this is all the same. This is all the same. I'm not sure if this one was here or not. The use of the automobile as a necessary adjunct to the earning of a livelihood in modern life requires us, in the interest of realism, yeah, here's a word they don't ever follow, realism, to conclude that the right to use an automobile on the public highways partakes of the nature of a liberty within the meaning of the constitutional guarantees. You cannot tax liberties and rights. It's a no-brainer. And we all know they're trying to screw us all over and they're acting illegally. This grand corporation of the United States of America, which is what it is, loves to wave their flags and talk about the law and being on board about everything. And they are the scummiest pieces of mass murdering trash that this world has ever seen. Hideous. You have no idea how deep it goes and how revolting and how maddening what they're doing is. You have no idea. Hopefully some of you actually do know how deep it goes and how horrific some of the things are that they're doing to us. And even worse, how horrific is their plans for us and what they're attempting to do with their New World Order. So, for me to continue to travel with registration, license plates, and a driver's license would not only be immoral of me, but it would also constitute fraud and the impersonation of a commercial driver. I think this one is a new one here. It is settled that the streets of a city belong to the people of a state, and the use thereof is an inalienable right of every citizen of the state. These are Supreme Court rulings, people. White versus City of Sacramento. Escobedo versus State Department of Motor Vehicles. This is what comes out when you go to the Supreme Court and you challenge the motor vehicles and your state or city. This is how they're going to rule, if you can get there. I respectfully requested that the DMV honor my rights by unregistering my car and voiding the driver's license, which I was defrauded into believing I was required to keep. That's repetitious. I already said that. I do this strictly as a courtesy to you, to whom I am not obligated to prove anything, nor to whom I am beholden concerning anything having to do with my natural and unregulable rights. Please do not misconstrue this letter as being a request for any kind of permission I do not require your permission to travel any more than I need your permission to pursue my life, liberty, and happiness, which is the same thing. I am, and then you would put your name here, your given name with a colon, and then your family name, the flesh and blood man, not, and then you put your name here in all caps because that's the corporate name. That's your straw man. If you don't know what that is, you need to look into it. Straw man, the corporate chattel. I'm not your...
Yeah, because on most documentations, your name is in all caps. When we're already taught, you know, you're only the first letter of your name should be capitalized. So once that shit go into all caps, you're talking about your straw man.
Your subject any more than I am the subject of the United States of America Corporation, aka the government. So I told them here that I'm attaching my first letter I sent to them to what I sent them yesterday, which I did. And then I go on with more. I read this stuff to you already. You can freeze it and read it here again if you want. Right there. Freeze it, read it, and you're back. The language and definition of motor vehicles was changed in 1961 as a means to deliberately con people into believing that the rightful use of the highways was regulable, private, and that required licensing. So this is all the same. It was in there in the previous video. And of course, if you want to ever prove to anybody that it's not a word game and that motor vehicle does in fact mean a commercial vehicle, you have in the RCW 9A56075 taking motor vehicle without permission in the second degree, where it states it distinguishes an automobile as different from a motor vehicle 3 times in one paragraph. Right there. If it was just an automobile, why would they have to say or a motor vehicle? They wouldn't. Speaking of which, why do they even have to have a list of definitions in their vehicle code if everything was taken at face value? Oh, motor vehicle, yeah, it's just your car. Well, then why do they need to define it? They wouldn't, unless it meant something else that pertained to something else, namely commerce. I hope this stuff's sinking into a lot of you. You're more than welcome to copy my letter and put your own information into it. I'll just say that you need to do your own research about everything. Okay? You always have to do your own research about everything. Don't think it's just easy enough for you to just print my letter, write your name in the blanks, and mail it off. First of all, this has a lot of stuff that pertains specifically to me. But I'm posting the link to it because you can use all this stuff here. Case law and all this good stuff in your own fight against this tyranny. So I say here, please see the attached copy of a letter sent from then Senator Wayne Stump to Ralph Milstead. This is new. The director of the Department of Public Safety in Arizona in 1985, in which he addresses people rescinding their contracts with the United States federal government and the state of Arizona, both corporations, and establishing themselves as free men and traveling without auto registration, driver's license, or any other evidence of contract. So this senator addressed a judge. No, I'm sorry, the Milstead, Ralph Milstead, the director of the Department of Public Safety, talking about people who are traveling without registration, driver's licenses, and other evidence of contract. See, he even knows that all this stuff is about contract. I don't have a contract with the United States of government, with the United States of terrorism, nor will I. So you can look up this document. I'll try to remember to put it in the link. If it's not there, just type in Wayne Stump to Ralph Milstead, right to travel, and you'll most likely find it. I've so far documented your absolute lack of response to my claims of right to travel and so far uncontested proof of your fraud. Due to your negligence in responding to my claims, I am left with 4 questions for you to answer. Is it safe to assume, number 1, is it safe to assume that there is no law which requires a non-commercial traveler to register his conveyance and apply for a driver's license? Number 2, does your utter lack of a response mean that you, a human being, are merely complicit in this massive fraud being perpetrated on every American? 3, does my original letter with all my evidence to travel being sent back to me with nothing more than a date stamp on it mean that you have absolutely nothing to disprove me? 4, can you prove to me that I am subject to your rules and regulations and obligated to follow your codes and statutes merely because I lived on the land known as California? And here's another ruling. Statutes that violate the plain and obvious principles of common right and common reason are null and void. Common right and common reason. You going from here to there if you want to cannot be restricted by anybody, least of all a terrorist. If I am wrong and the DMV is not extorting and defrauding millions of people out of hundreds of millions of dollars every year, please provide me evidence that the commercial driver's license I had previously applied for is in fact a non-commercial license. And please provide your California Transportation Code, or any transportation code, outlining licensing for people traveling who are not engaged in commerce when they are conveying themselves in their automobiles, not motor vehicles, a commercial term, in pursuit of their life, liberty, and happiness. And when you do so, prove to me that it is law passed by legislation and not just a statute or code, i.e. not law. And if you are actually able to do this, please explain to me how a corporation's law has the ability to make a right illegal. It would be greatly appreciated. Miller versus U.S. The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. So when you write your letters, and you're talking about things, back them up with pop in a Supreme Court ruling that's backing up what you just said. That gives you validity. So I mentioned again, for the 3rd time I've added this in here, where they're obligated under this ruling, that they are obligated to give me exempt plates. So, your prompt compliance is of utmost importance. So this is new on my letter. Listen to this. Your prompt compliance is of utmost importance for my well-being and safety due to the fact that policy enforcers, peace officers, police officers, traffic cops, might illegally detain me and demand driver, which I am not, and who might then, when they do not get any proof of my commercial activity on the highways, byways, roadways, potentially damage my household goods / automobile and or steal it. Then at gunpoint kidnap me and throw me in a cage, possibly injuring or even murdering me, an unarmed, non-combatant man exercising his right to travel. Unfortunately, traffic cops / policy enforcers do this every day all over our republic. And then I hold them accountable with this. By ignoring these facts and the information in my letter for the 2nd time, you will be considered complicit in this fraud and could be held liable under 18 U.S. Code Section 241, Conspiracy Against Rights, and you could be held responsible for whatever injuries and or property damage I sustain. So this is all the same stuff I read on my last letter. You can freeze it and read it. And then I conclude another long video. Sorry. Please understand that the information provided in this document, and then I give the document numbers, the first one, this document, and in my previous document, which is the same number with the DMV 1 instead of the 2, is merely a small fraction of evidence put before you. If I'm wrong, and there's actually a law that specifically states in plain English that any and all travelers not engaged in commerce on the highways are obligated to register their private property, apply for a driver's license, buy forced insurance, and have state-issued license plates on their automobiles, please send me the information. And let these 9 pages of proof of my claim be nothing less than an inspiration to you and an example of the volume of evidence I will be expecting from you. And remember, I said law, not statutes, codes, and regulations, which I have repeatedly proven to you are not laws, as so ruled by the Supreme Court itself. If you cannot prove to me, a mere traveler, that I am legally subject to the DMV's commercial code statutes and regulations when traveling, or if you simply refuse to do so, I will expect nothing less from you than a letter assuring me that my automobile has been unregistered and my commercial driver's license and license plates voided. With this, I will expect an application for exempt plates to protect myself from policemen who do in fact physically injure, legally detain, incarcerate, and often murder travelers for nothing more than exercising their right to travel. We the people must put an end to tyranny, greed, extortion, lies, and violence, and take back our rights. We're all human, and we all have rights. You are a human, so make note that the natural, inalienable rights I exercise daily, I do for you and yours. Thank you for your time and attention to this very important matter. Sincerely, and then my name with the colon. First name and last name. Always in capital with lowercase, capital with lowercase. Don't ever spell your name with all caps. That's only a symbol. So there is the letter, which I did actually send yesterday, certified mail. It costs $7 and change. And it's here on right here. I'll send you the link to this letter that I just read you. By the way, when I copy things onto Google Docs, it doesn't capture the highlighting and the bold and all that italicization, which helps the reader know that you mean business about certain things and that they should be looking at certain things. So you can go through it, copy paste it into your own document, and tweak it to represent you if you're doing this, or if you just want to use these court cases and hearings, etc., and rulings, just pluck them out of here, copy paste. So it's good for that. And when you go here, by the way, to, when you go to Google Docs and you see other document, you'll usually see other documents at the bottom of so the link I'm going to send you will bring you to this, what you see here. And this is the letter right here that I just read you. There's also my notice to law enforcement letter that I keep in my car. And there are other documents here too. Public Highways of Washington, there is no state. Mark Stevens style motion to dismiss, which is good. You should look into that. This is an actual document he wrote that you can put your information into and make it your own. You might have to pay for that or ask permission to alter the document. I'm not sure how that works because I have not done that yet. And there's a document, matter of right to travel and mandatory action. Police, let's see what this one is. Oh, police must Mirandize all. This is something I found recently. Police are obligated when they stop you to read your Miranda rights because you are technically, legally under arrest when they pull you over immediately. As soon as you pull over, you're under arrest. He stopped you. He's interrupting your life and keeping you from pursuing your life for nothing more than some light bulb being out on your car. So, but they don't do this. So anyway, I'm just saying that's a good source to come to Google Docs, and you could search for documents and find a ton of information here. So that's it. I'll shorten this I'll stop this long video again. I appreciate you all hanging in there, and I will link to this as well. Good stuff. Take care, everybody. American Jurisprudence, Constitutional Law, Section 329, page 1135. The right of the citizen to travel upon the public highways and to transport his property thereon in the ordinary course of life and business is a common right which he has under the right to enjoy life and liberty, to acquire and possess property, and to pursue happiness and safety. It includes the right, in so doing, to use the ordinary and usual conveyances of the day and under the existing modes of travel. It includes the right to drive a horse-drawn carriage or wagon thereon, or to operate an automobile thereon for the usual and ordinary purpose of life and business. What more do you need? This is one of hundreds of such case law sightings, quotations, whatever you want to call them, coming out of the Supreme Court and constitutional law and case law. It's that simple, people. It's really that simple. But like I said in my last video, you don't even need any of this stuff because you have your common sense. You have the right to go from point A to point B if you freaking well please to. So, I thought I'd crack open this video with that. It's always good to see this stuff. If you haven't come across this one yet, definitely you want to use this in your memorandums to dismiss for your court papers that you send in when you get your tickets for not having the government terrorist organization license plate on your car. Now, I have been bringing into my videos some 9/11 information and America is a corporation information. I hope you are all appreciative of that. If you're just coming here for only right to travel stuff, I will try to keep it not straying away too far from the topic of right to travel, but I do bring in those other things because it's important to know and to understand the big picture. 9/11 I bring in because 9/11 is what woke me up and introduced me to the rabbit hole, which brought me to the fact that I have the right to travel and that I've been
Yeah, this motherfucker sounds a little bit like myself, yo. Like, I was already studying a bunch of stuff like way before 9/11. So I was 19 in 2001. So I done dropped out of school. I grew up in South Carolina, but I done moved to Philadelphia. No family, no friends, you know what I'm saying? I'm living in the city. I'm at 19 now. So I'm aware of shit that's going on. And even though I dropped out of high school, yo, I've always been a big reader. Always just loved to fucking read, yo. And so I was already, like, my first journey was religion. Like, I started dodging Christianity at a young age. My whole family is Christians and still are. And it's like, this shit doesn't make sense to me. And so I started questioning shit. And, you know, since everybody goes to church, I was like the black sheep, was because I didn't like going to church and I didn't feel the Spirit and the Holy Ghost and all that nonsense and shit. Yeah, I don't know. So I started looking into other religions and figuring out that basically all religions say the same fucking thing, yo. Why is y'all so segmented when almost every religion at its core says the same thing? Anyway, and then from that shit I started getting into like the occult and mysticism, and that shit led to stuff like the Rosicrucians and the Knights Templars and the fucking Masons. And then that shit led to motherfucking Illuminati shit and ancient aliens. And in 2000, I was in Philadelphia. Yo, my homeboy let me read this book called The Biggest Secret by David Icke, the lizard dude. Everybody knows David Icke as the lizard guy. But for some reason, like, that book kind of like all the shit that I was always questioning and stuff, like, he pulled a lot of that stuff together. He kind of lost me when he started talking about different dimensions and, you know, we're being controlled from beings from a different dimension who control shape-shifting lizard people here who pretend to be human, who control the humans, and from some moon base. And I was like, whoa, wait, hold up. But he did make a lot of sense on a lot of different things, yo. And he was the one, like, in The Biggest Secret, really got me thinking about, like, government conspiracies and shit. And, like, all the fucked up shit, like, the government itself does. And then that next year, in 2001, it was like 9/11. I was like, oh, shit. Terrorism. And honestly, that was the first time I ever really deeply thought about, like, terrorism. But then you look into that shit real good, yo. You really look into 9/11. That shit wasn't no terrorist attack, yo. That shit was some false flag attack that was engineered, orchestrated, and carried out by the shadow government, the deep government, the dark government, whatever you want to. They, you know, because they're out to get us. They did that shit. And that's crazy. Yeah, you know, you already know, Sarah. That's all it is, yo. I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Baptist. I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm Jewish. Hey, Jews think they a race too. Like, wait a minute. Is Jewish a religion or a race? Like, I'm Jewish. Get the fuck out of here. It's a box, man. Once you already start putting your spirituality in a box, that means you cutting yourself off from other spiritual beings. You know what I'm saying? The Quakers, the Shakers, the Pentecostals, the Seventh-day Adventists, man, all this shit, man. What's that shit? That Mormon shit, man, them motherfuckers crazy. We're Mormons. Them Jehovah's Witnesses, man, them motherfuckers crazy too. Come to teach you about Jehovah, bitch. Get the fuck off my damn doorstep. Who fucking organized the Nicene Council of 325 AD? Go. You don't know? Oh man. Some people say Josephus Flavia wasn't even trustworthy with his fucking documentation. He was a liar for his own benefit and his family name. Next. Oh. And then you ask them about fucking Serapis Christos, and they say, huh? And you ask them about, why don't you study the books of the Apocrypha? And they be like, huh? What? Who do who now? You believe everything in the Bible? Everything. Okay. I want you to go get in. I want you to go get inside this big fish for 7 days. And when you come out, I just want to see what the fuck you smell like. I ain't never smelled somebody who been inside a fish for 7 days. You probably never get that fish odor off of you. You smell like fish for the rest of your life. religion. Religion is funny. What were we listening to? Oh, travel. We all have the right to travel.
Lied to all of my adult life. And
oh yeah, but he was getting to that point about 9/11, and I was saying what? Oh, started with religion, occults, all that shit. But when 9/11 kicked off, it was like, what the fuck, yo? I really did have to look into that shit, yo. And man, they just so much evidence to prove that, you know, it wasn't some crazy ass 19 hijackers with some box cutters who orchestrated this such an elaborate fucking attack, and our response time. Come on, guys. These motherfuckers was flying around for 40 minutes. You know what I'm saying? The response time when that shit was fucking ridiculous. And it's like, oh, well, we thought it was a drill because we had Operation Guardian, Vigilant Guardian, and we couldn't tell if the blips were real or not. Really? Fuck out of here. And then they identified one of the hijackers because he was on the plane that crashed into one of the towers that blew up and pulverized and disintegrated into a million particles of dust. And then they found his passport with his name and picture on it. And that's how they were able to identify him. But yeah, after 9/11, bruh, I questioned everything. I even questioned if the earth was flat one time. When I started looking into that shit like, wait a minute. Y'all motherfuckers on some crazy shit, man. Let me just listen and see what people have to say. Cause I've never been in outer space. You know, I'm not saying the earth is flat. I never say that. What I say is NASA lie about a lot of shit. And then once you catch a motherfucker lying, you gotta wonder, why are you lying to me? What else is you hiding? And I always leave it at that. You know what I'm saying? Cause them motherfuckers don't tell you the truth all the time. And that's weird. You know, cause NASA supposedly isn't a government agency. It's funded by the government, but it's supposed to be independent. What the fuck is y'all got? What y'all hiding? Are y'all always lying and shit? Did y'all go to the moon or not? Nah, y'all ain't go. Y'all what? Huh? But anyway, question everything. This dude's, like I said, he seemed like he's right in that same group around that same time frame. Like 9/11 woke up, yo. Alright, if it didn't wake motherfuckers up immediately, motherfuckers started questioning a lot of shit after that. You know what I'm saying? Because that shit was too fishy. That 9/11 shit was fishy as hell. And you want me to believe all this? Oh no, wait a minute. And then you go back and look at Vietnam and World War I, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the motherfucking Desert Storm. Everything got lies in it. God damn. These motherfuckers just lie all the time. And it's like, but y'all want me to believe that this shit happened the way that you say it happened, but y'all is a known liar. You is known for lying. But now, you really want me to believe you. And it's like, I don't know, America. I don't know. You know. So now I got this really, really terrible, like, love-hate relationship with America. You know what I'm saying? The only reason it's still a love-hate relationship because I have never had the fortune of living in any other country for a long enough duration to form a better opinion of life elsewhere. This is all I know. America. But if I ever do move somewhere, say Norway, Japan, Ghana, somewhere like that, and then I just have a hate relationship with America.
What woke me up and introduced me to the rabbit hole, from the topic of right to travel, but I do bring in those other things because it's important to know and to understand the big picture. 9/11 I bring in because 9/11 is what woke me up and introduced me to the rabbit hole, which brought me to the fact that I have the right to travel and that I've been lied to all of my adult life and being tricked into and scammed out of my hard-earned money to pay for a license, registration, car insurance, and everything else that has to do with the Department of Motor Vehicles, or DL, or the D, oh, for goodness sakes, here in Washington. Sorry, I've been very busy. My brain is not, the letters are not coming to me. And also, what I'm about to discuss with you is DMV in California, where I used to live. So, this stuff is all across the board. These case laws, Supreme Court, is for everyone, not just particular states where these cases were held. Okay, so let's get into this. My videos have been numbered because you're then able to follow my process. So the last video that I did having to do with my interaction with the DMV was I had read to you my letter here, which I sent to the DMV, asking them to, which says right down here after the Supreme Court ruling cases, I am the beneficiary and executor of my estate, which includes my automobile, not to be confused with a motor vehicle. Submitted simultaneously with this letter is my cancellation or surrender of my driver's license for the reason being given. I am not required to be licensed or registered. So you'll have to go find that video. I think it was number 10 or 9 in my YouTube channel. And you can, I go over this entire letter, okay? It even has the definitions of commercial, or I should say the commercial definitions of
motor vehicles,
these common terms we all used to
automobiles.
use, and a lot of people still use, most people still use, which actually have to do with commerce and not just humans traveling in their cars. Okay, you're not a driver when you're in your car. You're not engaged in transportation. You're not in a motor vehicle. These are traps. These are all traps, and they use these against you. I sent in a whole lot of right to travel information, more definitions, on and on and on it went. 5 pages long this letter was. I sent it to the DMV with my forms filled out to cancel or surrender my driver's license, which, by the way, expires this year anyway, and I don't carry it in my car. I have nothing in my car when I am traveling. No license plates, no registration, no insurance, and no driver's license. Not even in the glove compartment. I don't have it anywhere on me because I'm not a commercial driver. So I sent all that in, and they took 6 long weeks to respond to me and sent me back, let's see, bear with me here, these aren't named. Here it is. They sent my letter back to me with the stamp on it. Looks like 12 of January. Oh, I can't even read what that means. I don't think that's the 12th of January. But it wouldn't have been January 2017. That was a year ago. I just sent this in 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago now. Anyway, so I have, the document I showed you was devoid of the information. The number I gave my document, which is my VIN number, and then DMV1, one for the first letter I'm sending them. The next one will be a 2 at the end of that. And I took out my information here. So I'm just showing you this is my letter they sent back to me. And by the way, I did send them that letter I showed you, this one. I sent it certified, and I obviously got an acknowledgement that they received it, which obviously they did if they're sending it back to me. So I thought, well, what would they say about this letter with all this information in it about right to travel? So I scanned everything they sent me back to share with you, because I want you to follow my process. So they sent me several pieces which are not surprising when you see what they are and about what we'd expect. So they're probably out of order here, so I'll just pop them up and you can take a look at them. So they sent me this form, statement of facts, and I have here covered over what I wrote here. They wanted my license plate number. I wrote not on my non-commercial vehicle. Formally, and then I gave the license plate number that it used to be. And my VIN, vessel ID number, is here. I covered them out. I don't want to put this kind of information out on the internet. So the only thing that shows me that a human being had anything to do with this is that this is highlighted here. This is the only evidence that a human had anything to do with this response coming back to me. Highlighted here. This was highlighted here. So they're asking me to give them a statement of facts. Well, I just did send them 5 pages of a statement of facts, which they completely ignored. That's right, everybody. They completely ignored it. Okay? They also sent me this. This is the front of that other page. That's the back. This is the front. Nothing highlighted, statement of facts. They're not asking me to fill out any of this information. Then they sent me this, which is, I've covered up my license, the old license number, and then down here are all the little charges they're charging me. 2 of which are parking violation fee, $236 for expired meter, which of course, as I explained in my paperwork, has no flesh and blood victim. There is no one to take a stand in a court and say, you hurt me or defrauded me or damaged anything of mine. Therefore, it is not a law. It's void. So that's what part of what they sent me back. And then this incomplete application. See above. This is not an operating permit. I don't need an operating permit because I don't operate a motor vehicle. I travel. See, everything here is worded for commerce. But look at this interesting thing. Again, these are numbers and things that I've put yellow paper on when I scan this. So they're asking, of course, for money because that's what this is all about. This whole entire thing is just to get money out of me. But look at this, type of vehicle, vessel use, automobile. It's almost like right here they're actually confessing and saying, you're not in a motor vehicle, you're in an automobile. Do they even understand what they're doing here? I mean, if I took this into court and showed them their lawful definitions of motor vehicle versus automobile, which in the Revised Code Washington, there is one paragraph that distinguishes the two as being different from each other 3 times in one paragraph, motor vehicle or automobile. This is saying right here that my conveyance of the times is not a motor vehicle. It's an automobile, which makes it exempt of commercial fees and privileges. So they're
always tone your canvas. Don't
people
paint
don't
on
know
the
what
white
they're doing.
canvas.
Honestly, the people.
It's not good to paint on the white canvas, yo. Always remember this too. The Mona Lisa is painted on a piece of wood. Why? Because wood is brown. And what's good about brown? Other pigments stand out really vibrantly against brown.
You want to ask you to come pick up some?
Yeah.
Oh, so what's going on, honey?
You make some money?
Yeah. Come on in.
Battery low. Please charge now.
I gotta tell you something, Officer Flynn. It's a sad day when a native son takes up with his oppressor. So we'll live for that back home, you know.
illegal 3 pounds of cocaine into this country in 3 pairs of platform shoes. Its estimated value on the streets, $700,000.
I got the flow. Tell them I got this gas on off and down the road. Come to my stove. Knock on my door. Soon as I get running them, I got plenty more. I carry the flow. Got the flow. I got this gas on off and down the road. To my stove. Knock on my door. As I get running them, I got plenty more.
Can I ask you, if you won all the money, what would you do with it?
Bunch of hookers and cocaine.
Oh, that's not good.
I got the flow. Feel like I just came on off another boat. Come to my stove. Knock on my door. Soon as I get running them, I got plenty more. I carry the flow. I got the flow. I usually work. I got the flow. I do a show. I go sell a dose. I run for the hood. It's a dope show. Does anybody know what your frontal lobe does? Do you know what it means if you have a very large frontal lobe? You need a large forehead to have a large frontal lobe. But you motherfuckers wouldn't get that, would you? Don't hate, bitch. And none of your shit funny, man. Like, I done heard all the forehead jokes. I'm 37 years old, bruh. I've been hearing forehead jokes my whole life. None of your shit ain't funny. None of y'all. But the thing is, y'all motherfuckers still watching me and my big ass forehead, right? I'm on your fucking TV. You not on my TV, I'm on your television. I'm entertaining you. I am the most entertaining thing you have in your life right now is me. That's why the fuck you watching me. Y'all want to say corny ass motherfucking ain't even a joke. That shit it's not even a joke. You motherfuckers try to be funny and can't. That's how I know y'all are some young ass kids in here, man. I've been painting for 9 years. Prices vary, yo, from different projects. The Dank series, they're going to be $2,500 a piece. You know what I'm saying? So I might, if somebody buys all 3 of them, I might give them a deal. But for the individual colors, $2,500 a piece. I got some shit in the gallery tonight. I got some priced at $1,300. I think I got a piece priced at $3,300. I got a price. I got one piece like $2,000 or some shit like that. But if you follow me on Instagram, tonight is First Friday, and so I'll be at the gallery later on this evening, and you can see the pieces that I have in there if they hung all of them. I'm guaranteed to have one piece showing. I submitted 3 pieces. They might not show all 3 pieces, or they might do show all 3 pieces. Just, it depends on how many other people have art to put in there, and how much wall space they have available. So we'll see. But like I said, I'll go live on Instagram to show everybody the gallery, show everybody what art I have in there. It'll be a surprise to me. I haven't been down there to check it out, like, a sneak preview or nothing. So when I get there, it'll be the first time for me seeing which one of my pieces they hung, if they hung, all of them or not. So, and it'll be up there for the entire month of May. And then we'll have another member show in December. And then hopefully on next year's calendar, I'll be able to have a solo show. And so that's why I'm trying to churn out a couple of series this year. I'll probably do like several, like anywhere from 3 to 5 piece series. And so I can have a lot of material to choose from when I have my my solo show next year. I gotta grab a drink, guys. Bro, this shit right here is so good, yo. Goddamn, it's apple juice with white grape juice in it. Damn. battery died.
We could brewed our beer in a town you've never heard of. But I guess that just felt a little too small.
We had pictures just in of around 150 beached whales in Western Australia. It's happened near the southwest town of Augusta.
One of the deadliest mass whale strandings in WA history has claimed more casualties.
It had been a long and devastating day. Authorities believe they simply got to the animals too late after they beached the evening before.
No one knows for sure why whales beached themselves.
The same beach host to another mass stranding exactly 9 years ago.
The whales beached themselves at exactly the same place as a group of 80 did on exactly the same day in 2009.
I don't know. I don't know what's so special about the 23rd of March.
Mary Simonin was traveling here on Naramata Road Sunday afternoon when she made a startling discovery. She took these photos of at least 40 deceased birds littering the streets.
So it was certainly unusual. And it was strange. And I tried to imagine what might have happened. Like, I knew they couldn't have been electrocuted on the lines because birds are on there all the time. But I counted at least 40 of them.
The birds have now been removed from the road, but their cause of death remains a mystery.
There is a groundbreaking development in Africa tonight. Take a look at this video of the ground breaking open here. The rift is several miles long.
Now, geologists are warning that a huge crack in Kenya's Rift Valley could be showing signs that the continent is splitting. Just look at that. I mean, the power of nature, hey? Those movements in the earth began last week.
Here in Africa, scientists are divided as to how it came to be.
Giant crack in the earth opened up almost overnight, 50 feet deep.
Scientists, for the most part, agree that the continent is splitting in two, but there is debate over exactly how this most recent fracture was revealed.
A mysterious gash in the earth at the very spot where Africa is being slowly torn apart.
A 5.3 magnitude earthquake has struck near the Channel Islands in Southern California. Thursday's quake did cause some buildings to shake in the Los Angeles area.
The biggest earthquake to hit our area in more than 4 years rattled the region and some nerves.
I thought it was worse than the 5.3.
The floor started feeling kind of funny.
On the Channel Islands, at the epicenter, the eagles knew something was up.
A bald eagle, as you can see, left the nest when the quake hit, briefly leaving the little ones behind, but then did fly back.
Well, two pilots report. Last month, they say they may have seen a UFO while flying over Arizona.
And it was actually above us. It passed us like 30 seconds ago. Negative.
Pilots in two different planes, one a Learjet, the other an American Airlines jet, reported seeing a mysterious object over Arizona last month, we have learned. The exchange with air traffic control sounded like something out of the Twilight Zone.
They were sending one Papa Golf, good. And it was actually above us. It passed us like 30 seconds ago. They were sending one Papa Golf, negative.
Flying the friendly skies at 30,000 feet over Arizona turned a little freaky in February. The FAA just released these radio logs.
The UFO. It's murder 295. Yeah, something just passed over.
Not so funny when just minutes later, air traffic control asked a second flight in the vicinity if anything strange happened.
Yeah, something just passed over.
What was it? The FAA tells us the controller was unable to verify that any other aircraft was in the area.
Like don't know what it was, but it's at least 3,000 feet above us. So yeah, passed right over the top of us.
I think they exist. There's something out there.
Look at the mysterious light in the sky. There you see it, followed by a loud boom that rattled some San Jose neighborhoods. The majority of the people that witnessed it live near Branham High School off 85 and Almaden Expressway.
No, we simply don't know what it is, but most people tell us it was louder than any firework they've ever heard. They say they felt it inside their homes, and one thing is clear tonight, that this has now become the talk of at least several San Jose neighborhoods.
You can see this is coming from way over on this side.
This video posted to a South San Jose Nextdoor page shows a small light travel across the sky for about a minute, then a flash and boom, and it disappears.
Oh yeah, that doesn't do it justice at all.
Dale Johnson says it shook windows and set off car alarms Sunday just before midnight.
New Year's Eve, there's always some mortars or M100s or even M1000s going off around there in the park. We know what that is. This was nothing like that.
He's not alone. Nextdoor had more than 120 comments, people saying it sounded like it was right outside their front door.
I thought at first that maybe it was the transformer balloon, but we've had that happen before and it wasn't that.
A lot of people heard it.
pretty far away, too.
We asked the FAA if they could identify the flying object. A spokesperson didn't want to guess, but said it did not look like any aircraft operation. The neighbors, including the man whose camera captured it all, is just as confused.
I want to find out what it was, but the fact that we haven't heard, it's kind of weird.
Ted, a Mesa man says he caught something on camera that can't be explained. He says it's a UFO.
And whether you believe it or not, Arizona has had its share and been at the center of some major UFO stories in recent months.
Guys, this man says he's not exactly sure what he filmed, and frankly, neither are we, but many believe there is something out there, and it seems Arizona has become the center of it all. He shot this video from his cell phone Tuesday. A dot in the sky next to two airplanes that suddenly disappears. Earlier this week, the FAA released audio from late February in which two separate commercial airline pilots claim they too saw something unexplained. And of course, the mother of all UFO sightings, the Phoenix Lights.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
It was 1997 when the lights made headlines across the world. Whether the latest sighting is something or nothing, it's fun to wonder.
I don't know. I am not an expert on either.
0 to 60 may throw your hair back, but 60 to 0 will save your life. Get $60 off per axle on a standard brake service at Firestone Complete Auto Care. Whatever you drive, drive a Firestone.
There's a lot of things in this world that are unexplained, and this is just one of them.
And the FAA and the state told us they don't comment on these types of videos, but guys, the truth is out there.
Oh my gosh, dude.
So, Chad,
those are some amped pilots.
Yeah, they sound like you two. Are you guys believers in extraterrestrial life?
I'm a huge fan of Independence Day. So I'd like to believe that because I kind of would like to. I wouldn't want what happened in Independence Day to happen, but I just sort of like to.
I second that.
I'd say if they are real, it's time to make contact,
And like without being crude, and you can tell me if this is a bridge too far, Jesse, but like I hope they're hot.
Okay. So you guys are looking for extraterrestrials that may be attractive to humankind.
Strange sight at some ski resorts in Eastern Europe. This isn't one of those typical optical illusions. It's actually orange snow. People have been sharing photos of the phenomenon on social media, like these shots from Russia.
Skiers in Russia, Ukraine, and several other countries were surprised to see mountains covered in orange snow over the weekend.
A massive avalanche of slightly orange-colored snow buried more than a dozen cars at a popular ski resort in Russia.
Orange snow, as Mike Kaplan lectured Natalie and I just a few minutes ago, happens when sand from the Sahara Desert goes into the atmosphere. It then mixes with snow and rain and then falls over Eastern Europe.
It's just unbelievable.
That's amazing.
It really is. I'd be like, what is this?
Right. You think it's some alien phenomenon?
I don't think it's so pretty. Do we think it's pretty? I don't know what I think. It just looks a little odd. Yeah, it does. It looks odd.
Zombie raccoons sound like something out of a bad horror film, but police in Ohio say that this is not a Hollywood script. They have received over a dozen calls recently about animals exhibiting very strange behavior. One man had an encounter with one while walking his dog.
It's a so-called zombie raccoon, most likely infected with the distemper virus, and they're exhibiting strange symptoms. Animal control officials say they've been seeing more raccoons just like that right here in Cook County.
I got the dogs back in the house. The raccoon falls straight to the front door.
Once inside, Robert, a wildlife photographer, grabbed his camera to document what he called extremely strange behavior.
He would stand up on his hind legs, which I'd never seen a raccoon do before, and he would show his teeth, and then he would fall over backwards, and he'd go into almost like a comatose condition,
Imagine waking up and seeing this in front of your home as you let your dog out.
Oh my God. I would go back inside.
Officials say the
We could have brewed our beer in a town you've never heard of.
could have done everything the way we were supposed to.
We could have let wine just have cheese.
We could have just made beer for beer people.
But I guess that just felt a little too small.
The animals likely had the disease distemper, not rabies. It causes coughing, tremors, and seizures. They also lose the fear of people. That raccoon and 14 others have been euthanized.
That is weird. I run. Yeah, so fast.
What they're seeing in Ohio is just scary.
And we know that those raccoons are here too.
The same virus, absolutely.
Okay.
Thousands of dead shellfish have washed up in the Long Bay Okura Marine Reserve on Auckland's North Shore. Footage taken yesterday morning shows the dead shellfish, mostly cockles, lying on the shoreline at the entrance to the Okura River estuary. The Ministry for Primary Industries is testing the shellfish to determine the cause of death.
Hold on, guys. I had to get something to eat, you know. It's almost 11 o'clock. I'm hungry as fuck.
The concept of banned books, totalitarian states that practice mass book burnings probably come to mind. But open societies are also no stranger to the censorship of contentious novels and historical accounts of controversial events. One needs to look no further than right here in the U.S. Now, of course, the First Amendment prohibits the outright banning of books by the federal government, but there are many less insidious ways that dangerous content is being kept off American bookshelves. Earlier this month, New York University professor Mark Crispin Miller released a list of 5 historical books that have been actively suppressed and hidden from Americans. These books focus on issues from abortion to financial inequality and tell stories of America that don't conform to the mainstream narrative we've all been taught. Joining me now to discuss further, I'm joined by New York University Media Studies professor Mark Crispin Miller himself. Thank you so much for coming on, Mark.
It's good to be back, Abby. Thank you.
So, Mark, outline some institutionalized ways that literature is routinely censored in this country.
Well, as you pointed out in your introduction, we don't ban books. The First Amendment prohibits it. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. And, in fact, hundreds of books on crucial subjects, indispensable books, books full of truths that Americans really ought to know, have been undone in one way or another. Threats of litigation, for example, by powerful interests. Reviewers freezing out certain titles, or what happens most often is books are written off as conspiracy theory. What we're doing, I want to make clear, it isn't just listing 5 of these books, which we will talk about in a moment. Those are the first 5 books in a new series called Forbidden Bookshelf, whose purpose is to make important works that are now out of print available again. And the great majority of these books were indeed deliberately done in by powerful interests, by the CIA, by corporate powers, and so on. We're taking advantage of the digital revolution to do a dozen books a year. We're doing e-books, so that Americans can finally get hold of these crucial writings.
And Mark, why did you choose these 5 books for the first of this series? What common historical threads do they share?
Well, it was an embarrassment of riches, but I guess you could say that we picked the first 5 because they offered a very interesting range of different concerns, and also because I'd say 4 out of the 5 really speak to the moment we're living in right now. First of all, there's the Phoenix program by Douglas Valentine. This came out in the early 90s. It's an absolutely crucial and harrowing study of an enormous CIA covert program that took place in South Vietnam during the war there. It was basically a terror program whose purpose was to combine the forces of the military and the police and intelligence and basically pacify the South Vietnamese population and keep them quiet, basically enforce.
The Phoenix program, created by the CIA in 1967, was aimed at neutralizing through assassination, kidnapping, and torture the civilian infrastructure that supported the Viet Cong insurgency in South Vietnam. It was a terrifying final solution that violated the Geneva Conventions. The Phoenix program's civilian targets of assassination were Viet Cong tax collectors, supply officers, political cadre, local military officials, and suspected sympathizers. Faulty intelligence often led to the murder of innocent civilians. Rival Vietnamese would report their enemies as VC in order for U.S. troops to kill them. In 1971, William Colby, head of the CIA in Vietnam, testified the number killed was 20,000. South Vietnamese government figures were 40,000 dead. CIA officer Ted Shackley managed 600 military and 50 CIA liaison officers who were working with South Vietnamese officers in 44 provinces. Ted Shackley and Robert Comer played key roles in recruiting Phoenix program personnel. Many covert action officers were Cuban refugees from the Bay of Pigs fiasco. They ran the CIA's counter-terror teams, which were in fact assassination squads. Colby, Comer, and Shackley reported to the Director of Central Intelligence, Richard Helms, and the White House. From the beginning, the Phoenix program was conceived by the White House and supported by the CIA. Phoenix called for neutralizing 1,800 targets a month. About 1/3 of VC targeted for arrest were summarily executed. Green Berets and Navy SEALs would assassinate suspected VC sympathizers or cadre, as well as South Vietnamese collaborators and double agents. In 1982, an ex-Phoenix operative revealed that sometimes orders were given to kill U.S. military personnel who were considered security risks. He suspected
and in fact, using out certain titles, or what happens most often is books are written off as conspiracy theory. What we're doing, 5 books in a new majority of these books were indeed taking advantage of the digital revolution to do a dozen books a year. We're doing e-books so that Americans can finally get hold of these crucial writings.
And Mark, why did you choose these 5 books for the first of this series? What common historical threads do they share?
Well, it was an embarrassment of riches, but I guess you could say that we picked the first 5 because they offered a very interesting range of different concerns, and also because I'd say 4 out of the 5 really speak to the moment we're living in right now. First of all, there's the Phoenix program by Douglas Valentine. This came out in the early 90s. It's an absolutely crucial and harrowing study of an enormous CIA covert program that took place in South Vietnam during the war there. It was basically a terror program whose purpose was to combine the forces of the military and the police and intelligence and basically pacify the South Vietnamese population and keep them quiet, basically enforce the rule of the South Vietnamese regime, all in the name of fighting terror. Now, in his new introduction to this book, Doug Valentine points out that the Phoenix program could be regarded as a kind of template for our war on terror here in the United States, that increasingly we're losing our civil liberties bit by bit, so the government uses the danger of terrorism to justify all kinds of horrible infringements, on our constitutional rights, so that it's now okay, for example, to assassinate American citizens with drones. It's now okay to subject American citizens to indefinite detention by the military. All of this was first put into practice by the CIA in Vietnam through the Phoenix program, which accounts for the deaths of tens of thousands of civilians in South Vietnam who were tortured and assassinated. This is a book that, as I say, speaks to today.
I wanted to jump in here really quick and read a quote from that author's new introduction because it's so damning. He claims the Phoenix has already landed in America, of course, saying, "Take heed, reader. Phoenix has come to define modern American warfare as well as its internal homeland security apparatus. Indeed, it's with the Phoenix program that we find the genesis of the paramilitarization of American police forces in their role as adjuncts to the military and political security forces engaged in population control and suppression of dissent." Mark, it's amazing that I didn't even know about the Phoenix program. I know a lot about covert CIA operations. I mean, it's incredible that this really apparently did provide this blueprint for the ongoing war on terror. Can you speak more to that?
I never heard of the Phoenix program.
Well, yeah, and the fact that you don't know about the program basically means that you don't know about the book. And you don't know about the book because the book was marginalized, ignored, and so on. Doug Valentine had a lot of trouble. I mean, initially he got the go-ahead from William Colby, the head of the CIA, who was the most prominent defender of the program before Congress. And on that basis, Valentine talked to a lot of CIA officers who've been involved in the program. So it's very, very solid in a scholarly way, very well documented. But it became clear to the agency after a couple of years that they did not want this guy to be doing this research. So they immediately clammed up. And he had to go to war with them legally. The ACLU helped him. But then what happened when the book came out is that Morley Safer of CBS wrote a very damning review for the New York Times. Whether he did this at the behest of the agency or not, we don't know. But in either case, it basically meant the end of Doug Valentine's career as a writer who would have a major publisher do his books. He was basically blacklisted in an informal way. So we're trying to rectify that great wrong and help Americans rediscover some crucial information about our recent past by bringing the book out again in the Forbidden Bookshelf.
Absolutely. We keep seeing these stories repeated time and time again. Mark, another book, Lords of Creation, written by Frederick Lewis Allen, going for about $2,500 a pop for a new print copy on Amazon. Why is this book such a forbidden treasure? Mark, can you hear me?
I'm not hearing anything.
Well, we're talking about a book.
Wrong, and help Americans rediscover some crucial information about our recent past by bringing the book out again in the Forbidden Bookshelf.
Absolutely. We keep seeing these stories repeated time and time again. Mark, another book, Lords of Creation, written by Frederick Lewis Allen, going for about $2,500 a pop for a new print copy on Amazon. Why is this book such a forbidden treasure?
Okay, here.
The CIA, and more generally about the kind of covert government program that is put in place.
On Amazon, why is this book such a forbidden treasure? Mark, can you hear me?
I'm not hearing anything.
Well, we're talking about a book about the economic system and how it's basically predicted the capitalist expansion and predicted all of these things that are going on over the last 100 years. The robber barons, the Rothschilds, all these different families in the financial elite that have basically consolidated power and wealth over the years, predicting and predating everything that happened. This book was written back in 1935. Mark, why is this book such a forbidden treasure, going for $2,500 a pop on Amazon?
Yeah, The Lords of Creation is written by Frederick Lewis Allen, who was a very popular writer in his day. And all of his other popular histories were in print. This one book was not in print, The Lords of Creation, which is a really highly readable account, basically, of the early history of the 1%. It starts with J.P. Morgan's creation of U.S. Steel, and takes us through the history of how these buccaneering financiers have basically subjected America to repeated booms and busts and always enriched themselves in the process. It has the edition in Forbidden Bookshelf has a new introduction by Gretchen Morgenson of the New York Times, who really hits the nail on the head when she says that this history will help us understand where we are today and recognize that what we're going through now economically has deep roots going on for a long time.
Mark, another better-known operation than the Phoenix program is Operation Paperclip, of course, outlined in Christopher Simpson's book, Blowback. It's not necessarily the story that I wanted to talk about. It's his new introduction in this ebook. It's particularly fascinating to me because it outlines overt censorship that he encountered as an archivist when trying to issue a written critique about the government's declassification process. Can you briefly describe the story and why it reveals, or what it reveals rather, about the way the government archives its own hidden history?
That's right. He was part of an advisory group of historians who was supposed to help the government assess its own efforts at declassification, specifically of documents having to do with our Nazis and fascists after the war. And he wrote a little piece that was supposed to be published in a larger collection, a piece that was strongly critical of the declassification program and took issue specifically with the attempt to appoint John Yoo. You remember that name?
Oh, yeah.
John Yoo, the notorious attorney who sought to justify the Bush regime's torture program. They tried to put him at the helm of the National Archives. Now, there was a fuss over this, and cooler heads prevailed. But the interesting thing is that Christopher Simpson's piece about this, which he submitted to the National Archive for publication in their report, wasn't self-censored. They left it out of the report. So it's now part of the new introduction to Christopher Simpson's Blowback, which is the first, and I think by far the best history of U.S. recruitment of Nazis and fascists after World War II for help in the Cold War.
Certainly tells a different story than what we've been told about World War II and the defeat of Nazi Germany, Mark. I have to say, in the introduction to this series, you write an excellent introduction to the 5 books on ebooks, that once these books are gone out of print, they're gone forever. Is that really true, though? Because I was able to find these books in full on Amazon. I mean, what's the big deal with not having hard copies, Mark, when the advent of the internet's making books obsolete anyways?
Well, don't forget, we are publishing ebooks, so, we're not actually offering hard copies. I actually wish we were, because I'm a kind of diehard fan of actual books. Nevertheless, your point is well taken, which is why we're doing these as ebooks. Many of them are available in used editions online, but the fact is that when you publish a book properly, that's a way of introducing it to the world, if you go to look for a particular volume to buy it used on Amazon, that suggests to me that you already know that it exists. Right. You see my point? Whereas what we're doing is we're republishing them. We're making the world aware that they exist, and crucially, we're offering them with new introductions to bring them up to date. We've got a lot more books coming out, in the next few months and in the years to come. We're going to be doing I.F. Stone's Hidden History of the Korean War. We're also going to be doing Stone's Underground to Palestine, along with all of his other writings on Israel and Palestine. We're going to be doing Gerard Colby's DuPont Dynasty, Behind the Nylon Curtain. This is an amazing history of the DuPont dynasty that the DuPont Corporation itself managed to kill twice, both in the 70s and 80s. We're bringing that out with a new introduction.
Mark, I have to tell you that, I was so fascinated just reading the books that you sent me. I cannot wait to dig more into this really hidden history here that everyone needs to check out. Thank you so much, Mark Crispin Miller. Amazing project. Everyone get involved.
Thanks, Eddie.
Dark Life. For
King, what's up? It's the first painting I ever did, yo. I've officially been painting for 9 years. And my controller is dying. Yep. I did this paint. I was like, oh hell, I'm the fucking shit, son. And I kept painting. Yeah, the old Afro Samurai. 9 years ago. Next year I have a whole fucking decade under my belt.
First life in the universe? Stars are the lifeblood of the universe. Their energy provides heat, which drives the processes necessary for life to exist. They create planets. They create elements. We humans are literally made from molecules fused in the very core of a star. But are stars the only way of creating life? Perhaps not. So let's find out how else it might be done as we explore dark life. First life in the universe.
Yeah, man. I sell my art. That shit costs a lot of money, man. Only a few elite people can afford this shit. Everybody follow my Instagram, yo. I got an art show tonight. I'm gonna go live on Instagram for a little while. Let y'all see what I got hanging up in the gallery. So, paintings by the Prince, yo. You gotta put fucking underscore in between that shit, I think. Somebody said they couldn't find it when they just typed it like that. I'm gonna have to go back and edit that shit. I guess it's paintings underscore by underscore the underscore blah 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 blah. But that's tonight from 6 to 9. So I'll probably get out there like 6:30 or something, walk around for like an hour, show my face and check out everybody else shit, and see if I sell a piece, which I probably won't because it's so expensive. And you know, have me a free glass of wine and then bring my ass back home in the studio. AFA. There's a gallery called AFA in Scranton.
Number 4, habitable zones.
According to our current understanding of how life emerges on barren worlds, living things can be rather fussy about the conditions they're prepared to accept. To begin with, their planet must have liquid water to allow the chemistry of life to work its magic. To fulfill this criterion, you'll need somewhere with a surface temperature of around 300 Kelvin or 26.85 Celsius. And since planets don't have a giant thermostat hidden in a cupboard under the stairs, the only way to achieve this is by having a planet which orbits at a certain proximity to its parent star. Or is
The
For
Goldilocks
decades,
zone.
cosmologists have been searching for life-sustaining planets by looking within the habitable zone of stars, also known as the Goldilocks zone. This is an orbital area, neither too distant nor too close to a star, with this balance allowing surface temperatures to remain around the 300 Kelvin required for liquid water. But stars aren't the only source of heat in the universe. In our recent video, Dark Stars, we explored how planets orbiting black holes may also be able to support life. In this instance, there would be an equivalent Goldilocks zone surrounding the black hole, which would represent the only place life could exist. But are habitable zones all that special? Does a planet need to orbit a heat-giving object to sustain water-suitable temperatures? Apparently not. Because at one point in the history of the cosmos, this habitable zone may have comprised our entire universe. Stick that in your pipe, Goldilocks, you porridge-stealing weirdo. Number 3, the CMB. Abraham Loeb is an American theoretical scientist who believes life may have existed 10 to 17 million years after the Big Bang. Loeb, of Harvard University, says that in the afterglow of the Big Bang, the conditions were ripe for alien life to have sprung into existence. The early universe was full of superheated gas, which eventually cooled and condensed to form stars and galaxies. We can see the first light emitted by this gas in the form of the cosmic microwave background. Today, the temperature of the CMB is just slightly above absolute zero. But between 10 and 17 million years after the Big Bang, the temperature would have been closer to the 300 Kelvin required for liquid water to exist on early rocky worlds. Loeb's calculations can be found in his paper, The Habitable Epoch of the Early Universe, in which he also explains how rocky planets might have formed in the densest parts of our universe. The building blocks of life on Earth are elements like carbon and metals, and these reportedly only came into existence once the earliest stars started dying in massive supernovas 150 to 1 billion years after the Big Bang. Loeb's theory is that huge stars many times larger than our sun formed and died out quickly during the earliest times of the universe, with their destruction helping create the heavier elements needed to form planets and life before we previously thought. In an interview with Slate, Loeb expanded on his findings to suggest that the worlds on which these life forms existed would have been protected from asteroid bombardment and some of the more dangerous forms of cosmic radiation due to their isolation. Unfortunately, any life on these planets wouldn't have had much time to evolve thermal underwear before the temperature of the universe lowered so much as to drastically alter their environment. So, could an organism have survived this event? Number 2, adapt or die. Scientists have responded to Abraham Loeb's idea of an early habitable universe with mixed emotions. Freeman Dyson, the world-famous physicist at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, thinks the adaptability of life should not be underestimated, having been quoted as saying that anything is habitable if you are clever enough. Let's put Mr. Dyson inside a pizza oven for 3 days and see if he still thinks that. Conversely, some cosmologists have contended that complex life would have no chance of existing upon such worlds, since a few million years is far too short a time to produce it. Abraham Loeb agreed with this sentiment in the aforementioned interview with Slate, stating that early universe life forms would have been very simple organisms like algae. Within a million years, this algae would have to adapt to cooler temperatures or face extinction. However, as Freeman Dyson says, this isn't an impossibility. In fact, when you consider that many worlds would have been rendered habitable by the existence of a warm universe, the chances of adaptable life existing on some of them increases significantly. We can boost these chances even further if we consider that climate change and internal heat retention may have helped these planets stay warm long after the CMB cooled. In Loeb's paper, he was quoted as saying, "Thermal gradients are needed for life. These can be supplied by geological variations on the surface of rocky planets. These internal heat sources, in addition to possible heating by a nearby star, may have kept planets warm even without the redshifted CMB, extending the habitable epoch." With regards to climate change, Loeb has noted that a process known as collision-induced absorption may have allowed molecular hydrogen within the atmosphere of early planets to act as a greenhouse. Gas. How? Collision-induced absorption. Yes, collision-induced absorption. We prefer the fancy words here at Strange Mysteries because they make us look smart. Usually when two molecules of hydrogen or any gas collide into each other, they bounce apart. Imagine two very large people running into each other and then bouncing backwards after they collide. Now imagine two very large people running into each other and then sticking together in a lover's embrace instead of bouncing away. That's collision-induced absorption. When collision-induced absorption occurs with hydrogen in this way, it becomes supramolecular. And being in that state allows it to do some pretty crazy stuff. Hydrogen acts like a completely different molecule in this state. But it's still hydrogen. One of its new special abilities in supramolecular form is being able to act as a greenhouse gas. Now, collision-induced absorption tends to occur only in certain conditions. One of those is being blasted with microwaves. Seeing as there is cosmic microwave background radiation warming the entire universe, collision-induced absorption easily occurs on any planets that, for whatever reason, have hydrogen on them. Loeb goes on to mention how a blanket of molecular hydrogen may also have helped extend the habitability of these early worlds, basing this assessment on Pierre Humbert and Gaidos' 2011 paper, Hydrogen Greenhouse Planets Beyond the Habitable Zone. This study was intended to show how the habitable zone of ordinary stars could be extended if a planet's atmosphere was composed of supramolecular hydrogen. But it unwittingly extends the habitable period in Loeb's paper too. So if there were many planets teeming with simple life all on different worlds in the early universe, how might this have translated towards intelligent life? Number 1. Gaia. In one of our recent videos, the Gaia hypothesis, we explored the theory that life works as part of a feedback loop with the environment in which it develops. In the context of the early habitable universe hypothesis, the most relevant link is that between microorganisms and Earth's temperature. According to the Gaia-based CLAW hypothesis, organisms whose biological processes help cool the planet have been seen to evolve when Earth has been too warm. Vice versa, organisms which help warm the planet evolved whenever Earth began to get too cold. Essentially, these organisms evolved to adapt to their environment, and the environment adapted to them. If Gaia is true, Loeb's young habitable universe becomes even more likely. The young organisms born on those early rocky worlds should have evolved in a way which made their environment more habitable and thus helped to raise its temperature. This is made more likely by the findings Gaia's proponents made through their simulation of a planet called Daisy World. Having modeled a biosystem containing variant numbers of organisms, Daisy World's creators discovered that the presence of many different species helps a planet become habitable much quicker. But surely, this is bad news for Loeb's theory, is it not? Since the short time frame he proposes gives little chance for a wide variety of species to emerge. This is true. However, that would only be the case on one single planet. In Loeb's paper, he argues that if life persisted during this time, it could have been transported to newly formed objects through panspermia. Now, remember, the universe at this time was much smaller. These early worlds, while still far apart, would have been much closer than Earth is to distant star systems today. Panspermia, The exchange of microorganic life through the cosmos via meteors and asteroids would have been far easier and more likely when the universe was smaller. Thus, if the Gaia hypothesis is correct, many forms of simple life could have spread throughout the early habitable universe and subsequently helped more and more planets sustain habitability for a far longer period. Eventually, some of this may have evolved, as it did on Earth, into complex and intelligent life. But enough about the early universe. What about the future? Can life survive in our solar system when our sun goes crazy and burns up the Earth? Sure it can. And we're going to explore this in our bonus video, Mankind's Successors, which you can watch on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Strange Mysteries. For a $2 a month pledge, which you can cancel at any time, you'll get to watch this and all of our bonus content, which goes deeper and darker into every topic than YouTube allows. If you don't want to donate, then
bullshit. We know you wanted more. Strange Mysteries on YouTube and our Patreon bonus videos weren't enough to quench your search for truth, to give you that sense of awe and wonder again, to go past what you thought was the end, to give you the answers you seek, but which only lead to more questions. That's why we just upped the stakes. Chemicals of reality. Reality, consciousness, brains. What else is there? Ask yourself that question. Perhaps that's all there really is, but perhaps everything else is found within a place where these ideas, these things, overlap. Some thing, some place that is undefinable. To many people, altering certain chemicals in their brains produces what they would simply call hallucinations. In fact, what we're going to discuss specifically used to be called the business.
2050 is only a short 34 years away. For centuries, people have predicted that the future will be taken over by robust robots. But what will 2050 really look like? We have a few ideas. Amazing! Number 10. The world's population will increase from 7.2 billion to at least 9.6 billion. Using projections based on data collected up to 2012 and a Bayesian probability methodology, the United Nations has reported that the global population will reach at least 9.6 billion in 2050 and could go as high as 12.3 billion by 2100. Much of this increase will be due, in part, to higher fertility and a slowdown in infertility in places like Africa and India. Number 9. Minorities will reach 50% of the US population. If population trends stay the same, then the United States will be considerably different than it is today in terms of both race and ethnicity. Trends indicate that people who identify as Caucasian will decline, and that by 2050, those who identify as a minority will rise. Minorities make up 25% of Americans. That number will increase to 50% of Americans by 2050. Whichever way you look at it, it's a vast change in a relatively short time period. Number 8. The sea level will rise by at least 1 foot. It's an unfortunate reality that sea levels are currently rising, and whether you believe global climate change is man-made or a natural occurrence doesn't really matter. The end result is the same. The sea level is expected to rise by as much as a foot by 2050. The numbers don't just come from one single location, rather they're from multiple sources. If rates stay constant, then the melting ice sheets will raise sea levels by 5.9 inches. The glacial ice caps melting will add 3.1 inches, and ocean thermal expansion will top it off by 3.5 inches. All of this creating a total of at least a 12.6 inch rise in sea levels. While it certainly won't be Waterworld, anyone who has seen how far a tide can come in can attest to how much this raising of water levels will actually change the world. Already, 5 Pacific islands have been lost due to rising sea levels, and numerous countries are at serious risk of losing substantial land unless appropriate barriers are in place. Number 7. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans will be divorced. Is love turning sour? In 1970, over 60% of Americans were married. The number of Americans getting married is expected to decline to less than 40% by 2050, while divorce rates are expected to steadily increase to 1 in 5, or 20%. Number 6, demand for food will increase by 70%. Feeling hungry? Better eat up while you can. Given both population growth and rising incomes, it's easy to see why cereal production alone will need to increase from 2.1 billion tons to 3 billion tons. Also, meat production is going to have to increase by over 200 million tons in order to reach the needed total of 470 million tons by 2050. Part of this increase is apparently going to be a result of the production and demands of biofuels, fuel that is made from organic materials. Number 5, 1 in 5 developing countries will face water shortages. While it may seem that water is never ending, this is not actually the case. Currently, half of the population lives in countries where water tables are rapidly falling. It takes approximately 12 gallons per day to sustain an average human, while the average American uses about 158 gallons. Since the 1970s, the population of the planet has doubled, but the use of fresh water has quadrupled. This is at a rate far faster than any aquifer can hope to replenish itself. Number 4, at least 50% of jobs will be replaced by robots. In 2050, robots and technology will continue to lead the way. A recent Pew Research report estimated that robots and artificial intelligence will be included in daily life, potentially taking on roles as everything from cleaners to sex partners and babysitters. According to a study by the Oxford Martin School, almost 50% of jobs could be automated as soon as the next 20 years. This, of course, means that new jobs will be made available, so much so that the US Department of Labor estimates that today's learners will have 10 to 14 jobs by the age of 38. Number 3, nearly 70% of the world's population will live in urban areas. As of 2014, 54% of the world's population lives in what's considered to be an urban area. Projections by the UNDCE's Population Division show that the proportion of the urban population is expected to increase to 66% by 2050, adding another 2.5 billion to the cities of the world. Number 2, renewable energy could provide 80% of US electricity by 2050. Amazingly, according to a study by the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory, it's entirely possible that the United States could be sourcing 80% of its energy from renewable resources by 2050. So, what are we waiting for? Simply a lack of financial incentives, as oil and coal are cheaper and easier to obtain energy from. This is going to change though, as they're finite and will eventually run out. Number 1, cancer deaths will be effectively 0 for everyone under 80. One of the world's greatest killers may die a silent death itself. Well, almost. Since 1990, the overall decrease in smoking, earlier diagnosis, and improved treatments have resulted in a 1% decline in deaths due to cancer. And by 2050, cancer deaths are estimated to decrease by a startling 60%. The average mortality rate due to cancer in the US is 44.5%, yet in 34 years, it's estimated to be 8.5%. The result is likely to be that some cancers will just be as inconvenient as other chronic but non-fatal illnesses, and more lethal cancers won't necessarily be a death sentence. Depending on decisions we make now, the average person in the year 2050 will either be living in a Star Trek-like paradise where we less hours, or we'll be stuck in some sort of Mad Max-like horror show where we fight for water and we despise the machines that we let ruin our lives. The year 2050 is so close, and yet so far, and every decision, no matter how small, can affect what 2050 will look like. The question is, what do you think 2050 will look like? Thanks for watching.
I don't know if y'all motherfuckers, yo, shout out, what up? If motherfuckers keep voting for presidents like Trump, man, by the time, we might not make it to goddamn 2050. These some bitches can't get their shit together, man. I'm trying to see what the life is gonna be like for my grandkids. That's that Tron music, you know? Sound like Tron. Some weird ass shit.
Experience a blend of refined craftsmanship and raw power.
You're listening to public programs at the American Museum of Natural History. Would you trust a robot surgeon to strap your kids into a driverless car? In this podcast, join Michio Kaku, author of the best-selling book, Physics of the Impossible, as he offers his predictions about how today's emerging technologies will affect life in the future. Dr. Kaku's talk was recorded at the museum on May 9, 2011.
We physicists love to make predictions. In fact, some of these physicists believe that perhaps the universe is infinite in space, infinite in time. So let me quote from that other great philosopher of the Western world, Woody Allen. Woody Allen once said, quote, "Eternity is an awful long time, especially toward the end." And we physicists, well, we invented the laser. We invented the transistor. We helped to build the world's first computer. We wrote the World Wide Web. We also invented television. We invented radio, microwaves, radar, MRI scans, PET scans. Almost everything you see in your living room, in a hospital, was invented by a physicist. And when we helped to create the internet, one physicist made a prediction. He predicted that his creation would one day become a forum of high culture, high art, and high society. Well, today we know that 5% of the internet is pornography. But that's because teenage boys log on to the internet. Just wait until the grandmas and grandpas of the world log on to the internet. Then 50% of the internet will be pornography. So I've had the rare privilege of interviewing 300 of the world's top scientists for BBC Television, for the Discovery Channel, for the Science Channel, and that's why I decided to write this book. You see, because when I was a kid, it all started when I was about 8 years old. Everyone was talking about the fact that a great scientist had just died. It was front page of every newspaper on the earth. Albert Einstein had just passed away. And I'll never forget, they showed a picture of his desk, and the caption said, "Unfinished manuscript from the greatest work of our great scientist." And I said to myself, well, why couldn't he finish it? I mean, it was a homework problem, right? Why couldn't he ask his mother? I mean, what's the problem? Years later, I realized it was the unified field theory, the theory of everything. He wanted an equation 1 inch long that would allow him to, quote, read the mind of God. So that was one role model I had. The other one was on Saturday mornings. I used to be glued to the TV screen watching Flash Gordon. And that introduced me to the world of aliens, spaceships, cities in the sky, invisibility shields, the world of the future. But then I began to realize something. I realized that I didn't have blonde hair, I didn't have blue eyes, and I certainly didn't have muscles. But I realized there was a scientist who made the series work. And then I realized something that really changed my life. I began to realize that to understand the future, it helps to understand physics. Because we physicists, we invented most of the gadgets and the wizardry of the 20th century, and now we are inventing the 21st century. So let me begin now to give you a guided tour of the future as told to me by 300 of the world's top scientists. Let me say that my previous book, hold on a second, was Physics of the Impossible. Could we just dim the lights a bit now? And that was also a New York Times bestseller, talking about teleportation, telepathy, psychokinesis, time travel, things that we may have beyond 100 years from now. But let's today talk about the next 10, 20, 50, and the next 100 years. Now, predicting the future is difficult. Abraham Lincoln, around 1860, was asked to predict the future of this great country of ours. And Abraham Lincoln said, "Gentlemen, sometimes it is better to keep your mouth shut, even if your friends think of you as a fool, rather than to open it up and remove all doubt." Well, let me open the mouths of 300 of the world's top scientists. In 1863, Jules Verne writes 2 books that are amazing. He predicts the next 100 years. He got the space shot to within 10% accuracy, the size of a capsule to within 10%, the launch site, Florida, touchdown in the ocean. He also got weightlessness correct. He got the fact that it took 3 days to reach the moon, 3 days to come back. How did Jules Verne get that so accurately? And then he did something even greater. In 1863, Jules Verne predicts Paris in 1960. He predicts what Paris will look like 100 years into the future. Well, the manuscript was so preposterous, so incredible, that they simply couldn't publish it. It's just too mind-boggling to assume that Paris in the 20th century would look like this. Jules Verne predicted in the time of the American Civil War, when most of us had wagons that were stuck in the mud, he predicted glass skyscrapers, fax machines, something like the internet, gasoline-fired cars. And I said to myself, how did Verne do it? Not 1 novel, but 2, right on the button. And the way he did it was, every time a scientist went through Paris, he would pump them for all the information. What was the latest in rockets, the latest in submarines, the latest in building architecture. So Jules Verne interviewed all the top scientists that went through Paris. That's how he did it. So let's do a thought experiment. Let's now imagine the world of our grandparents and our great-grandparents, the world of 1900. How would they view us today? That's just 100 years ago. Talk to your grandparents, great-grandparents, and this is what you would find. First of all, people didn't live very long in 1900. You were lucky to get into your 40s. Life expectancy in the United States in 1900 was 49 years of age. Most people were dirt farmers, and long-distance communication, that was yelling at your neighbor. High-speed travel, that meant riding in a wagon, usually in the mud. Okay? Life was short and brutish in 1900. So if they were to look at us today, what would they think of us? They would think of us as wizards, sorcerers. I mean, think about it. In 1900, imagine going to the moon. Imagine cars that have 300 horsepower in an engine. Bombs that could wipe out entire cities, and the electrification of the planet Earth. Now that's just in the last 100 years. You can talk to your relatives about this. There are people alive who remember this. However, now, let's talk about your grandkids, your great-grandkids. How are your flesh and blood going to be living in the year 2100? As told to me by these scientists, they tell me that we will view them not as sorcerers and wizards. We will view them as gods, like Greek gods. And think of what the Greek gods could do. Zeus could simply mentally control objects around him. And we can do the beginnings of this now. Mental control of computers. Just by wishing it, we can make things come true. Remember, I'm not a science fiction writer. I'm going to show prototypes of everything in this lecture. And there are perks being a god too, you know. Hey, Venus had a perfect body and an ageless body. Not bad. And Apollo, he could ride across the heavens in a chariot. Yes, we will have our flying car. For you skeptics out there, we will have our jetpack and our flying car. And Pegasus was part horse, part bird. We will have zoos of extinct animals. We will be able to bring back extinct animals. So let's break it down. I'm now going to show you prototypes of the year 2100. By the way, my favorite Star Trek episode was this. Remember that Star Trek episode where they land on a planet, and what do they meet on this planet? They meet Apollo, the god. And they say to themselves, oh my God, our 23rd century technology is useless against a god. But then they figure out, hey, now wait a minute, this is ridiculous. We're scientists. This guy gets his energy from a computer, a power pack. They locate his power supply. They destroy his power supply, and then he's reduced down to an ordinary mortal. The point here is, to paraphrase Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from divinity. We used to fear the gods. One day we will become them. And how will we do it? Well, first of all, there's something called Moore's Law. Moore's Law says that computer power doubles every 18 months. Now look at this on a log chart. Look at this curve. On a log chart, it's a straight line. You can set your watch to this curve. This is the source of the wealth of nations in the last 50 years. You realize that today, when you get a greeting card, a happy birthday card, you open it up and sings happy birthday to you. There's a chip in that birthday card. That chip has more computer power than all the Allied forces of 1945. Hitler, Eisenhower, Churchill would have killed to get that chip that you get in the mail that sings happy birthday. And what do you do with it? You throw it away in the garbage. And your cell phone. Your cell phone today has more computer power than all of NASA in 1969 when they put 2 men on the moon. In fact, when you see all these old videos of the moonshot, look at those computers. 64K memory computers. I mean, I wouldn't get into that space capsule knowing that I was backed up by 64K computers. You have more in your cell phone than all of NASA. Well, look at this curve, a straight line. And so we can take it out another easily into the future. Of course, it'll eventually run out, but I'll get into that later. So let's talk about it. The internet. Where will the internet go? It's already making enormous changes in the world. Look at the Middle East. Facebook, Twitter, changing the course of the Middle East, which has been static for centuries. And all of a sudden, Facebook and Twitter are changing the Middle East. Where will the internet be in the future? In the next 10 years, the internet will be, among other places, in your glasses. These are internet eyeglasses. They recognize people's faces, in fact. If you're at a meeting like this, you bump into somebody, you say to yourself, I know this person. Jim, John, Jake, I know this person. Who is he? I hope he doesn't come up to me and say hi to me. Well, in the future, your glasses will say, it's Jim, stupid, remember? How many times do I have to remind you? This is only the second time this year you bumped into him. And if he speaks Chinese to you, it will translate Chinese into English. These... All
right, guys, let me take a break for a minute. Yeah, let me take a break for a little while, guys. I'll be back in here later on today, though.